diverse, we chase the light. Cohort Season 7 rise. On the blockchain we are wise. Innovation in our eyes.
From that, started working with DAO House, and have kind of just like cycled through the community in a bunch of different ways. But I've also gotten to meet a lot of really cool people and seen a lot of really cool tools established. And so this kind of like talk that I threw together is really gonna kind of like showcase I um, what I kind of think is like a good kind of mindset to keep when when you're getting involved in this space and when you are um, new to kind of like Web3 and just like throughout your career in the space as well. So let me know if you can all see my screen. Oop. All right.
Deacon, you're unmuted, by the way.
Yeah, Deacon may chime in and help me out here a little bit. So essentially, yeah, so I'm calling this the juice, right? And so this is essentially like when you have lemons or problems, right? Like how do you squeeze them and get the juice? And so the talk is really about like identifying those internal problems and how they can become external projects. And one of the things to, I guess, keep in mind, really, right, is there's like a saying that I was told a lot in school and growing up, which is that there's no stupid questions, right? And I think the same thing applies in the Web3 space, is that the reason they say there are no stupid questions is because more often than not, other people will have the same questions. So teachers want to encourage you, to ask them. And I think that's important to realize about, development and when you're building, the same thing is about problems. Once you identify problems, there's a good chance that other people are experiencing the same problems. And that's kind of where can identify things that you want to solve, and you start by solving them for yourselves and then realizing that other people also may need them solved. And so just to take a look back at I don't want to necessarily just say Raid Guild and DAO House and Edit Cartel, but this kind of just like collective Web3 group that really spawned kind of through this group and have created all of these things, right? But looking back, Spencer joined earlier and gave an overview about Haas. He spent a lot of time working with DAO House, working with mock DAOs, and identified that like what we were really having an issue with was how to delegate roles and responsibilities to those people. And I really just like took that and created something super cool with it that is used all over. And so that's just something that spanned out of his experiences and his internal, struggles building out DAO House platform and working in the DAO space. Similarly, the Yeeter project as well also came about with the need for projects to raise, right? ICOs had really gotten a bad rap early in the space, and in a lot of ways for good reasons, but they're not an inherently bad system, right? Like crowdfunding can be a really good way to bootstrap your project. So providing a like unruggable solution to that was something where they, like identified, well, like we need to be able to raise money and VCs are not a strategy for us. Okay, can we rethink ICOs in a way that is not prone to the same results? And then also DAO House, right? Like Moloch DAOs were summoned originally like 2019 or something, I want to say, and the original smart contracts still needed tooling, and DAO House came in, built on top of them, and have iterated respectively since then. So kind of continuing on, apps, I mean, Spencer already kind of gave you really a summary about that, so I won't really dive into that here. But then I was hoping Deacon can give us a little more insight into the history of Yeeter and how that came to be.
Sure. I mean, the very first Yeeter really was an answer. There was two things. One of those was definitely like the lemon juice thing you were talking about, because there was a trend on Twitter and other spaces of people yeeting, which was like um, an influencer saying like, "Here's my address, send funds to it, and then I'm gonna do something. I'll drop you a token or something." Sometimes they did that. Most of the time, it was just a rug, right? And so, even though like, I mean, we've been playing with crowdfunding ideas for a long time, Twitter and scammers like took it to the easiest form, and started taking advantage of people. But they also showed that, I mean, there's something to this mechanic, and a lot of times that's what the scammers can do. It's the same thing with meme tokens and why we created Speedball. But there's something to these things. They're taking advantage of it, but we want to take the good parts and also add the parts that make it what we think at least is more legit. And so I think the first Yeeter thing we did was a safe that just basically broadcast people, using the safe API, people sending to it. We funded what was called Padawan DAO. It was a DAO of middle schoolers and high schoolers, I think, that were just trying to get into Web3. And it, just having a real simple interface and being able to see transparently where the funds were going to, and then having a multi-sig to kind of protect a little bit from collusion worked. I mean, I think they raised 30 or 50 ETH or something. And then, from there we were like, well, we can actually make this even better. We can make it into a DAO right off. And that's spurred into things like Yeeter, the Yeeter project, and Speedball. Speedball taking the lemons from the meme coin world and being like, well, there are good things about meme coins. There's community momentum. There's like the hype factor and getting exposure kind of things. But then, usually that's the point where it ends and it turns into more of a degen activity, which there's nothing wrong with that either, but there's a spectrum. So if we wanted to make it a little more legit, then how do we add some, more controls and protections and democratic principles and things like that. So that's kind of the history of Yeeter, I guess.
Yeah, and that's again just right, like taking the like problem, right? People getting rugged, people trying to raise, and then finding like a way to juice it to get the like product out of it in a way. All right, what about for Moloch? Right, we're on the V3 of Bauhaus and the Moloch smart contracts now.
Yeah, and that one actually relates directly to what you're saying, because Moloch V1 was launched, as a smart contract, and Metacartel forked the Moloch DAO, and Metacartel then needed an interface, and so that was what we did. We built what we called Pokemole at the time, Pocket Moloch. It was a mobile-first app. It used a form of account abstraction way before it was ready, really, and it caused a lot of problems. But from there we started Metacartel and Yang DAO, which was like making memes for Andrew Yang. It was weird, and a couple others, and then that eventually evolved into a launcher of Pokemoles called DAOhaus, and then DAOhaus helped create Moloch V2, and a new version of DAOhouse, and then on to Moloch v3 and continuing to build on the DAOhouse front end repos and SDK.
Yeah, and so the trend here, right, is like that you build it for yourselves, and then turns out other people could use it or could benefit with it. Like even Moloch, right? Like DAO experimentation had happened, and the reason that I believe, like, I mean, wrote the Moloch smart contracts was to solve the problem of the DAO hack, and so it all really ties together. And if you're not familiar, right, like I have been working on a project called Cookie Jar, which is on its kind of second iteration through us, in a combination of like Raid Guild, DAO House, the funds coming from Meta Cartel and public mounts as well, right? And so Cookie Jar at its core is another funding mechanism, right? And so like, do we really need another funding mechanism? Like, initially, if you would have asked me that before we were building just like something that would solve a problem that we were having in DAO House or in Raid Guild, which was the like churn and pain points of going through proposals regularly for reoccurring things like posting or the graph, or small like meaningful but like kind of insignificant tasks. I would have said there's no way we just don't, right? Like there's so many tools already. Like what are the other funding mechanisms that we can name? I don't know if you guys can help me out here, but obviously like quadratic funding with Gitcoin, right? There's retro public goods funding. There's like direct funding for grants. There's like
Juicebox.
what, Octant? Yeah, Juicebox, Drips.
Splits. But some of these kind of lean more
Splits,
towards
yeah.
like not necessarily the funding, but more the allocation, right?
Yeah. But the point really is that like, oh, whoop, I guess this animated, is that there's kind of like different flavors and different use cases for each kinds of things like this, and what Cookie Jar is like was meant to be for like small trusted groups of these reoccurring things, where it's like, or at least that's in my mind, right, where you can really be optimistic, and by integrating with other protocols like hats or like a Moloch DAO, then you also can protect the jar. You have a gating mechanism. You can use things like Rage Kit, or you can remove the hat for people. And I was also not initially expecting for like there to be as much interest in Cookie Jar as we've seen, which is like a good and a bad thing. Good thing in the sense that like people are excited about it. Bad thing in the sense that like everyone wants to use it, but also we don't have a lot of like funds for it, so it's kind of been on the back burner for us. But people want it, and it's something a little different, and it's also a different use case. But it was spawned out of us facing these internal just like challenges, right? And so now we're working towards getting that finished up. So that's like leads me to just like a little bit of advice time, unsolicited advice for everyone here, is that just like the point is building things and experimenting. And as you like develop and advance your career in the space, just pay attention to the like things that annoy you, or the things that you end up noticing like, okay, I need to solve this issue for myself, and then test it and see what other people think about it as well. And that helps validate the idea, because you could have something there and not even know it. That's kind of how I feel like Cookie Jar emerged, and I feel like a lot of these other projects have spun out of us trying to solve our own problems. Like that's not necessarily like the best thing all the time, but you need to like get other people involved and excited about it as well. But just pay attention. Pay attention to what you're struggling with and the problems that you try to solve for yourself, and build it and see if other people want it as well. Um, so that is about all I have, I think, for this, right? Um, Curious if there's like any questions about this or about Cookie Jar more so. You can take a look at Cookie Jar briefly to give a little more of an overview on that as well. But some other people have already reached out and happy to get people kind of on board and get the last like issue that we have out there fixed up so we can turn it loose on the people. Oh yeah, Gibbous. That was a good one.
Um,
All right, cool.
well, actually, I mean, we got a few minutes before Bar Lucid hops in, but I was wondering, like, with different hackathons that you've been a part of, like the project, the Reaper project, I thought was cool. I know that we haven't gone much further with it, but it was kind of a thing solving a problem. Maybe you'd want to talk about that a little.
Yeah. Okay. So another project that I built with Hunter, who's another guy that is a member of Raid Guild. He went through, I want to say cohort 4 or 5 also, and has been working with Cup of Joseph over at Open Dollar as well. But we did an ETH Denver hackathon and we built something called DAO Reaper. And the problem I was trying to solve essentially was that there was a lot of risk, and in my opinion still is, of DAOs with high treasuries suffering from inactivity and essentially just having all these tokens decay in their multi-sigs, right? So the DAO Reaper was designed to kind of allow the DAO to set some KPIs, and then if they don't hit them after a certain amount of time, right, kind of like had a point system where every time you would hit like your defined metrics, you'd go +1, and if you didn't in an interval, you'd go minus 0.5, right? So you're trying to like you're banking stuff up, realizing that it's not a like a straight linear shot to success, right? That it like ebbs and flows up. But eventually, if your DAO activity just falls off, then the funds from the treasury should be liquidated and sent off to a public goods fund, just so they don't sit there and decay, right? I'd talked with people that had been involved in some other DAO projects. I don't know if I really should name names or anything, right? But there was just like inactivity people that disagreed, so they couldn't get proposals passed. People that were fearful of legislation, so they were whales, and so they didn't want to, I guess, take the like possible legal brunt of it, and they would just like kill all proposals that were going to use DAO funds. And so part of the like thought process behind it was like, if you don't use it, you should lose it, and it should go to other projects that want to build things. Not like for me, when I was talking with people about this at Denver at the hackathon and stuff, there was a lot of people that were really excited about it. There was also a lot of people that were really scared of it, right? Like initially, we didn't have that point system to allow people to bank up stuff to protect their DAO and protect their asset. It was just like pretty cutthroat. I also think there's like some things to think about in terms of like marketing and naming there. Like DAO Reaper really fits with the like Moloch Raid Guild kind of aesthetic and vibe. But I feel like if I were to reboot that, I would go for something more like regenerative, or something like compost, or something that allows like the representation of new life or ideas to spawn out of it as well. Because people were just like, oh yeah, that's cool, but that's scary. Like, oh, that's cool, but I know our vibe is death, but yeah. But that doesn't mean everyone's vibe is death, and like, you know, so
You need a little hamster vibe in there, I think.
Yeah, right.
Cool. Thanks, Rowdy. Anyone else have any final question? Great talk, man. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for having me. And yeah, feel free to, if you want to DM me or reach out to learn more about Cookie Jar. We've got a project thread going for it as well. If you want to help out and get involved, definitely happy to help walk people through it and give them starting points as well. All right, cool. I'll turn it over. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
Yo, check the mic, 1, 2. Squeak, squeak, it's Hammy G. Descending into the abyss where things get funky, see. This ain't no Disney flick, no cheesy cartoon chase. This Moloch's lair, a bureaucratic soul-crushing space. Like Dante's Inferno, with more paperwork and fees and demonic interrupts that make you